Good evening, everyone. My name is Abhishek Jain, and I'm pleased to invite you all to the first episode of the Master of Architecture or the MArch series by Planty. Towards the end of today's session, we will also be having a Q&A session for which I would request you all to put your questions in the live chat box. Today, we're very fortunate to have with us Mohammed Saifiz, a graduate of the 2018 batch from the School of Planning and Architecture, New Delhi, who then went on to pursue his master's in Masters of Architecture from the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL. He's currently an architectural assistant at Flow Architecture, a deputy managing director at the Guardian Multi-Speciality Hospital, and also the founder and director of Guardian AUD. In this session, Mohammed will be speaking in detail on the application process to the Bartlett School of Architecture, as well as the opportunities available both during and after an MArch from the Bartlett School of Architecture. I would now like to hand it over to Mohammed to begin this session.
Hi, everyone, and thanks a lot, Abhishek, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my journey with you all. So let's begin. I'm Mohammed Saifiz, and as part of the MArch series post-BR degree, I'll be sharing a small presentation that includes my experiences and hopefully try to answer some of the common questions that pop up while thinking of pursuing masters in architecture. So just give me a second, I'll share. So, all right. So I would like to start this session by introducing a book by Simon Sinek, Start With Why. I highly recommend you all this book. Just check it out. Maybe just watch the TED Talk. That'll be much easier. So without confusion, let's just start with why. First thing, why Master of Architecture. So since this session is mainly focused on students of BArch, I'll start from where I did my undergrad, that's SPA Delhi. My BArch course at SPA was really interesting for many reasons. Apart from the fact that I got to learn a lot, this was my first exposure to architecture design and design thinking. And this being the first, I was kind of looking around for answers for many questions that I had regarding architecture. But the funny thing is, more than answers, I started getting even more questions during my time there. I'm not saying it as a negative, but it was something that really pushed me to look out and find more and more answers. There's an interesting quote by a famous author named Peggy Herbert, who says that what happens tomorrow is the future, but what happened yesterday is already part of ongoing history. Why this resonates with me is because I think most of our education system relies on what has happened. And thus, for me, up until that point of the whole course, it was kind of like a history lesson. And even though that is very important for our education, understanding what has happened so far, our ability to kind of innovate requires one to constantly train yourself to think what's beyond and what could happen, what's possible. So that is very crucial. And I believe this type of research needs to be an integral part of our education system. It also forms the backbone of most master's programs. So if you're kind of clear, if you have a clear direction or even a broader subject of interest, like urban design, for example, in my case, a master's program will help you narrow down to identify a unique area of interest. It'll also help you identify resources and even networks and contacts that that are required to take this particular idea that you have forward and also even implement it in the real world. So this was one of the main reasons why I decided to pursue a master's in architecture. So, and if this kind of resonates with anyone, I hope it becomes like an inspiration for you all. So now the next question comes is who should apply for this course? So like I said, if I were to suggest who should apply, there'll be someone who is very keen to do research, someone who likes to innovate, someone who is looking forward to providing architectural solutions for a better future. And this kind of depends from course to course. Some courses are very bound to the reality, looking for instant solutions. Some courses are a bit more into the future and is looking for a solution for a problem that might arise in a couple of years. So, and if you think that this is what you want to do, then I would say you should apply for masters. And just keep in mind that master is not the only way to find these answers, but it's probably the best overall package that you get. So I would highly recommend this. Another thing is, like in most colleges at SPA, when I was studying there, we started from small scale buildings, and then it kind of scaled up as we progress in the course. The thing with design thinking is that it's very personal, and if you're true to yourself, it kind of starts to reflect your personality. And in my case, I was very much focused on what the larger picture of things. So even while designing a residence, I would think of how would this impact the existing ecosystem? If I design a house, how would this affect the movement of people around it? And what does this mean for the community? It's more about the environmental impact, etc. So by third year or so, I was kind of clear about my interest in urban scale and, I would say, transportation systems, the way things moved within the city. I think it's very important for anyone who is planning to apply for masters to find their own niche as early as possible. That's what I would recommend. This is not very easy, as it takes time for one to experience all the different stages in their course before making your decision. So like we all know, like in architecture schools, you have different stages as the project scale gets bigger as you progress. So you don't really get a clear idea of how your UD might be, or how your later, like your thesis the insight that you might get before making a decision. So that's also there, but I would suggest you identify it, try to relate it to your personality, and then that is an approach that I took, and it has worked for me. So I was kind of fortunate to have made up my mind. Why this is important is because in most architectural schools, like I said, it's around fourth year and fifth year that we get options to pick our design projects. And up until then, I think most of the students get a similar project. I don't think you get that many options to pick, but there might be exceptions, but this is the case most of the time. So if you have made up your mind, it becomes easy for you to work towards your goal. So I'll show you some of my undergrad projects, which I then translated or took it to my portfolio, which I decided to do after I had kind of identified urban design as my area of interest. So the first project would be an airport. It was to design a terminal for Jaipur International Airport. Since airports are the gateway of the city, the design had to focus on showing an image of the city, because this becomes the first encounter for anyone entering the city. So that was very interesting, and you'll also get to learn the impact of an airport in city planning as well. So this was my first project. So if you all can try to identify what these 4 projects have in common, it'll be really interesting. And then my second project follows the urban design studio that we had in 5th year, where we took up a mixed-use transit-oriented development project. And the project kind of caters to the inner city and intra-city transportation needs by housing underground metros, overhead stations, skywalk connections, and bus terminals, along with essential facilities such as transportation functions, commercial, residential. So this was my second project. Coming to my third project, it was a seminar project. Like I mentioned before, that we don't really get to look beyond what exists. This was an example of breaking that kind of a thought process, and I was really fortunate to be a part of this. And I don't think this carried over for the upcoming years. But during our time, we did get to experience this one, where we had to project a scenario for 2037, the Delhi transport system. And the scenario was where the culture of ownership has changed and people no longer own anything. Instead, there's this sense where products have completely gotten converted to services, and this starts to reflect in the mobility sector as well. And this shift in the economy would be driven by the Internet of Things, giving rise to something called the Transponet or Transportation Internet. And we also looked at the impact on the bill fee. Coming to my final project, this was my thesis, and I decided to design a sports city within the intersection of 3 types of transportation systems, like highway, railway, and the waterways, and also explore a new typology for sports complexes. So the project of this scale was supposed to be an urban initiative for an inclusive approach towards developing the quality of sports infrastructure as well as education, and also create way for sports tourism. So if you look at these 4 of these projects, I was able to put forward my interest in urban design and transportation systems, and that was kind of very clear. And this becomes crucial for your narrative in your portfolio. So if you get a chance to pick a project, do it in a way where you can then claim that it was all meant to be, or it's something that I had planned for, and it reflects your interest, and it makes it easier for the person selecting you to make up their minds. But if you're not very clear about your master's by the end of your course, then you still have a lot of opportunities whereby you can either take a look at all the projects that you have, the work that you've done, and then kind of sit and find the intersection point. Or you can go for a totally new course because you want to try something new. But I would recommend that if you have an idea in mind, a course that you have in mind, an interest, then you should make sure that it's reflected in your portfolio and the projects that you have. Instead of just putting all the projects that you've done, just narrow it down to the projects that really matter for the course. Now coming to a mark at Bartlett. During that time of application, when I decided that, okay, I'm doing urban design and I'm going to apply for masters, Bartlett was ranked the best university for architecture by QS ranking, and this was a major attraction along with their research reputation. So under MArch at Bartlett, there are 5 different courses, including 2-year courses, 1.5-year courses, and 1-year courses. So the MArch, the REBA Part 2 is 2 years, Then architecture design and urban design are 1 year, and the other two are 1.5 year courses. Since I was part of the urban design MR program, I would talk more about that. I would delve into something that was really interesting for me and why I chose this particular program, or why I picked Bartlett because of this program, is because there was an interesting thing called research clusters. So the urban design program at Bartlett is divided into further groups called research clusters, and each cluster follows a very unique research methodology, and each of them are driven by the tutor or the person leading the cluster, the course, and their research background. So this is something that was really interesting for me, because you get to see, even within a course, you get to see all the different approaches that you have, and you get to learn from them. And it's your friends around you who are learning completely different things, and it's still an approach towards urban design. And there's a lot of networking and all cross-matching opportunities for inspiration. And these approaches is something that tries to push boundaries of architecture and to project scenarios in the future, and then identify solutions for that, so that we are all prepared when the time comes. So this was very interesting for me. So I didn't really have any confusion while applying for this course, since it was offering exactly what I was planning for. So question is, how do you apply? So I don't think the application process has changed a lot since my time when I applied. So you mainly have to focus on your portfolio, which I mentioned. I gave an idea of how you could combine your projects, and the choices you could make way more. So that's why I wanted you to kind of understand why it's important to have a purpose for your undergrad education. It's not necessary, but it gives you a real understanding of where you want to go towards. So then your portfolio will start to reflect each and every point, that every decision that you made, and all the projects that you've done slowly start to become really crucial for your applications. So it's not like a mixture of projects. Then comes a personal statement, which is an essay, which is your narrative, in which you explain your purpose, and the portfolio is there to kind of back it up visually. You require references from your tutors or mentors. You would have to give your IELTS or TOEFL for your English test. And along with that, you'll require some transcripts of your previous certificates, etc. And that's pretty straightforward, the application, and especially for not for masters in general, but just for the Bartlett one. This is how it was when I was applying, and I think it's still pretty straightforward like this. Now, when should you apply? Applying in terms of timelines, which Bartlett they're pretty clear of. It starts around October, November, the application process, and if you're applying for scholarships, it's better you apply it as fast as possible, because the deadlines are during Jan or Feb. But otherwise, if you're not applying for scholarships, then the application goes till June, June, most probably June, and you still have time. I'm thinking about your own timeline. If either you apply immediately after bachelor's, or you take a year or a couple of years gap. There are two ways to go about it. So I know few of my friends who did this, who found time in between their thesis, which is, to be honest, it's slightly more challenging than we think, to get your references, to get your essay right, to combine your portfolio. Why I didn't do it was because I realized my thesis was to be really crucial for my application. And I really wanted my project to be there in the portfolio, so I didn't want to apply before my project got over. So that's why I thought I'll take some time off. I had to focus on my thesis, so I took some time off. I decided I'll apply next year and prepare my portfolio and all the projects together. So these are two different ways. It's up to you if you don't want to spend that extra year. But I took the year to even digest what I've learned in that undergrad process. So that's about it in terms of when do you want to apply. Another thing would be, I've been asked this quite a lot, if you have to work before your master's. I don't think it's necessary, but for people who are kind of confused of if this is the right course for me, let's say urban design, if I take urban design and I'm not really sure if I would enjoy urban design. So one way to do it is after your course, you work with an urban design firm and you get to experience, even in a firm, you get to experience different scales of projects. And through that, you would kind of identify your area of interest or your niche. I know friends who've done this, who've worked with different firms, and then based on the projects that they've been part of, they've identified their interests. So there's a lot of ways to go about it. But as far as I'm concerned, I chose this particular path. And it also gave me a bit of confidence that I was prepared for the application and I didn't rush it. So that was it. Now talking about some of the work that I was part of at Bartlett. Now, I would say Bartlett was probably the biggest experience that I had in terms of the amount of information that I was exposed to, the type of softwares that I was exposed to, the applications of it, and also getting exposed to a lot of theory and design philosophies and urban theories. It was really exciting, and the environment is also highly appreciative of innovative ideas and thinking. And I think that's really core to what Bartlett stands for. They're looking for innovations. So following the theme of the cluster, our group explored a phenomenon called urban fragmentation. So while connecting cities, regions, and even continents, like large infrastructure systems, transportation systems such as railway lines, highways, they divide neighborhoods that are otherwise connected. So this was our the project's named Project Research, and this was our main project throughout the urban design course. And it was a group project, and we were exposed to quite a lot of different approaches. And me being from a cluster called machine learning or machine thinking urbanism, we were exposed to a more data-driven approach towards urban design. So while connecting cities, regions, and even continents, these large transport infrastructures like railways and highways, they divide the neighborhoods that are otherwise connected. So this is one of the biggest paradoxes of contemporary cities around the globe. Connection at large scale is creating kind of fragmentation at community level. Our project research aims to tackle this growing concern around fragmentation. It does this by exploring computational design strategies and implementing it in multiple cities across the globe. So that was our approach. And looking at the whole of UK, so we started with the whole side of UK. We created kind of algorithms to analyze the whole of UK to identify potential fragmentations. We were able to identify 146 fragmented sites, most of which were in London. There are several impacts of fragmentation were mapped and used as a secondary layer of intervention. And then once these data layers were mapped, you would start seeing the densities of these data sets, and that will help us identify the site that we really require for intervention. So this was done using huge data sets. And once the data layers were overlaid, we were able to identify that the King's Cross site was the most affected region. And we also had a very intense data analytics session where all the collected data sets were then analyzed and overlaid on a grid. And this was then prepared for machine learning. So you can start to see how different the approach is towards urban design. The urban design that I was part of in my undergrad was very different, and it's more about you trying to. It's not driven by data. It's more driven by your understanding of the scenarios, and it has less to do with what the data says. So this was really interesting and way ahead of our time when we started the course. So we used several algorithms to analyze the data, machine learning, and through machine learning analytics. This allowed us to understand the correlations and between different sets of data, and to identify like the primary data set which has the most influence in the city. This was another experimentation process that we had. It's called permutative rewriting. So we take these data sets and try to generate sculptures or data sculptures. This was done through a generation of a 3D grid, and then you kind of voxelize it using different shapes. And these permutations give rise to several iterations of data sculptures, and it gives really beautiful sculptures. We were also exposed to a lot of analytical approaches towards design. So using sound values and even visibility values. So you can start to see how intense the course would be. It just being a one-year course, but you get to experience quite a lot. And I would say it's a bit packed, but if you're really curious about things, it's a really great opportunity that you had to at least experience it once. And I would say for me, this was one big factor of coming and pursuing masters, that sometimes when you are in a situation, you don't really realize what is an innovation here. So unless and until I just go on the internet and then search for a couple of things, based on what we do here, execute here, it's all relative. It's not really an innovation yet. But when you're in a course where you really see the people, or you can go and just have a chat with people who are really pushing the boundaries of architecture, then you can start to think that what if we think beyond that? How can we contribute towards creating an innovation here? And I think that's a very important point when it comes to masters, and especially at Bartlett. I was able to experience that. And these are some of the design visuals of the project. In the end, it shows integration with the city network. And this is completely generated using data and other analytical methods. And the design kind of implements different strategies to defragment the site and create different urban scenarios across the whole project. The design kind of provides a seamless movement across the railway, connecting the existing St. Pancras station and the landscape on both sides, and also overcoming this fragmentation that was happening because of the overground railway lines. We also had a couple of arenas and more community integration towards this project, and other activities that could add functionality towards this. So that was it from the projects that I was part of. Now think of future prospects. So this is one of the biggest concerns that people raise when it comes to applying for masters or going abroad, especially in the UK. Prospects, it's very difficult to answer this question, but I can some idea about it. Few of my friends have gotten into really big firms, like literally big firms. So there is a lot of opportunities for people who graduate from the course. One thing is mainly because of the expertise that you possess. You have a set of unique understanding of urban design, and that is important when it comes to a lot of big firms, that they are looking for innovations. So you're there. Now the thing is that the amount of skill set that you would possess once you graduate is enormous. You'll be exposed to modeling softwares, visualization. Throughout the course, they would have workshops and other minor courses that would help you learn this at Bartlett. And another thing that it's kind of like I would say in terms of jobs and research possibilities are really high because you're doing something really unique, and thus if you want to do a PhD, the chances are really high because you already have something that is different from what other people are doing, and most universities are accepting of your ideas. I've mentioned about the skill set. Another thing is the shortage of immediate application. It's if I talk about my the course that I was part of, which is like a data-driven urbanism, and if I were and using machine learning in order to come up with design solutions, if I were to see an immediate application of it in India, it's still possible in cities, but then when you move slightly away from it, it becomes really hard, and it becomes hard for you to even trust the data set that you have, or the quantity is not quite large enough. So the applications are quite low, but the why I mentioned it as a good thing is that when the data starts to kick in, or when these things start to progress, you would be like the pioneers in this field. And I think that is a big thing when it comes to courses like this, that everyone would be looking towards the people who have these expertise in order to have consultation for these design solutions. So that's it from me, and I think we can have like a Q&A session if you guys want to clear some doubts regarding the things that I've discussed, and then we can move forward. So yeah, that's it from me, Abhishek.
All right. I would just want to start by saying that was a very, very detailed and informative presentation. So thanks for that. And also, actually, thanks for sharing your work, because I think that also gives a very good idea as to what you can do, what you should do, and what are the expectations. So that was just brilliant. I really think that we have too many questions as such. But like the one thing that I do want to ask you is with respect to when you're actually making the decision that, okay, that I've completed a B.Arch and now I want to go into an M.Arch, or which particular master's is it that I want to choose, at that particular point of time, how do you think a student should go about making that kind of an analysis? Do you think it's better if they go into 2 to 3 years of some kind of job X and then try to make the decision? Or do you think it's preferable that they just talk to a few people, a few seniors such as you who might have done that particular degree?
Yeah, that's a really important question to ask. So that's what I kind of tried to focus on how I went ahead with it, but it's not the case is not same for most people, and there are a lot of courses that you have when it comes to masters, and if you are that's what I suggested. If you have a set of work that you've done, a list of all the work that you've done till that point of undergrad, you can then sit and go through it while you're preparing your portfolio, just compiling them to see or pick out the common factors that you have in each project, or what are the areas that you most enjoyed while doing a project, and then kind of narrow down your topic according to that. Or I would recommend if you work under someone, then you would start getting interest when you start seeing the real life applications of the project. So it's these two kind of things. So if you're highly research driven, then you can go a bit more speculative, like I did. I was more into that. But if you're someone who wants to do masters in order to implement it as fast as possible, then I think going for a job would be really helpful, because otherwise you won't really see the applications of what you're learning, and then applying for a course. So does that answer the question?
Yep, it surely does. So thanks for that. And I think that does bring me to the end of the Q&A session. Yes, it does. So with that, I would also like to bring the session to an end. So thanks a lot, Mohammed, for coming for this session and taking the time out for this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Abhishek. Yeah, no problem.